Welcome. God is here. You are here. The communion of saints is here. Take a moment to create space physically and spiritually for this time of worship. Take a moment to give thanks to God for all that has been a blessing this week. Take a moment to offer up to God all that has been painful this week. And now, take a moment to simply be still and know. Whatever it is God needs you to know in this moment, know and be. Amen. Hear this reading from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 13, verses 1 through 9, and then 18 through 23. That same day, Jesus went out of the house and sat beside the sea. Such great crowds gathered around him that he got into a boat and sat there, while the whole crowd sat on the beach. And he told them many things in parables. Many things, saying, "Listen, a sower went out to sow, and he sowed some seeds, and they fell on a path, and the birds came and ate those seeds right up. Other seeds, they fell on rocky ground, where they did not have enough soil, and they sprang up quickly, since there was no depth of soil to hold them back. But when the sun rose, they were scorched, and since they had no root, they withered away. Other seeds fell among the thorns, and the thorns grew up and choked them. Other seeds, though, fell in good soil and brought forth grain, some 100, some 60, some 30-fold. Let anyone with ears listen. Then Jesus said, "Hear the parable of the sower. When anyone hears the word of the kingdom and does not understand it, it is as if the evil one has come and snatched away what was sown in the heart. This is what was sown on the path. As for what is sown in the rocky ground, this is the one who hears the word and immediately receives it with joy. Yet such a person perhaps has no root, but endures only for a little while. And when trouble or persecution arises on account of the word, that person immediately falls away. As for what was sown among the thorns, this is the one, the person who hears the word but cares for the world and the lure of wealth, which choke that word, and it yields nothing. But as for what was sown on good soil, this is the one who hears the word and understands it, and who indeed bears fruit and yields, in one case 100-fold, in another 60, in another 30. God bless the reading of this word. Amen.
They saw the clouds on the horizon. Nobody there seemed concerned. Jesus said they must cross the water. Now he was sleeping in the stern. Quick as a flash of summer lightning, caught on a sea of crashing waves, waking him up and crying, "Save us!" They didn't need to be afraid. Never lost, he knows where you're going. Never lost, even though the wind is blowing, and there may be some stormy seas. He says you must cross, but with Jesus by your side, never lost. We used to rise, face the morning, like it was just another day. But now we know that without warning, how quickly everything can change. It's like we're walking through a doorway. What lies beyond we cannot see. As we walk into the next moment, or into eternity, never lost, he knows where you're even though the wind is blowing, and there may be some stormy seas, he says you must cross. But with Jesus by your side, never lost. He knows where you're going, never lost. Even though the wind is blowing, and there may be some stormy seas, he says you must cross. But with Jesus by your side, you're never lost. Never lost.
Planting a seed. I have a question for you. How many of you out there are gardeners? Some of you, yeah, maybe a few. Okay, how about this one? On a scale of 1 to 10, how green would you say your thumb is? 10 being you can grow anything anywhere, and 1 being you kill fake plants. I have absolutely been someone who has killed fake plants, but I would probably say my skill level today is maybe right there on a 5. I love plants. I grow them everywhere. My family will tell you I am so addicted to gardening that when I lived in my tiny apartment in Phoenix, 500 square feet total, I had this vertical garden in my closet with these growing lights, and I tried carrots and green beans and spinach and, well, tomatoes, and really everything was very nice and green, but nothing ever actually bore any fruit. But now I live in Tucson, and I have a yard. And I know enough about gardening to know that this person in this story, the sower, doesn't know anything about gardening. So to begin with, why on earth would a good sower sow seed on a path? I would never plant seed on my sidewalk. Or why would I plant seed on the rocky berm that is in my front yard? It would just die. Or why would I just scatter seed all over in the wash behind my house? All the thorn bushes would spring up and choke it right away. No, I am a careful gardener. I will make sure that everything I plant is well tended and is placed exactly where it needs to go. And I will make sure that I don't waste seed by just scattering it everywhere. But I wasn't always this careful as a gardener. I remember when I was just a little kid and the very first time I heard a preacher tell this story in church, I ran right home. I think I probably missed whatever it was the preacher was trying to teach us about because I grabbed all the bird seed I could find, which was primarily sunflower seeds. And I should tell you, my dad, he was a gardener. He and my mom both gardeners. But my dad, he had these terrace gardens that would just, they would have won awards in magazines. I'm quite sure of it, had that been something we did. But he loved gardening. He had terrace gardens with all these different flowers. He had this immaculate, manicured lawn that was so green and fluffy. Oh, it was just the prize jewel of the neighborhood. And we had all these areas around the house with rocks. And I came home after hearing this story and I took handfuls of this sunflower birdseed and I scattered it in the grass and I scattered it in the terraces and I scattered it in the rocks. I had such a blast spreading that seed all over the place. And then, a few weeks later, my dad begins to notice these sunflower seeds coming up all over the place. And he says, where did these come from? And I said, well, Dad, I I'm like the sower in the story. I just sowed seed everywhere. And my dad said, with a very good sense of humor, with all the love that a parent can muster up, especially when they're frustrated, Beth, when you plant, you have to pay attention to what goes where. In gardens, everything has a place it goes, and you want to ask the gardener before just scattering seed. Absolutely great advice for gardeners and for 5-year-olds who are eager to grow sunflowers everywhere. But in true kingdom of God fashion, the whole point of this parable is to upend what we think we know about how God works and surprise us with an even better reality than we can imagine. Growing the kingdom of God is not like tending a cultivated garden. So the first thing I notice when I read this story is that it is set out on the sea. There are so many people who have gathered to hear Jesus preach that he actually has to get in a boat and back away from the shore so that everyone can hear him. That is the first thing I notice about this story. But then, as you begin looking out at that crowd, I wonder what you see. Because when I look out at that crowd, I don't see careful, obedient, friendly, temple-raised church folks. Not that they would have been church folks, but you get the idea. No, this was a crowd. Or, in modern parlance, there are some who might even call this crowd a mob. And it was all sorts of people. Don't be thinking that this was quiet, obedient, very well-behaved people who were just coming to stand interestingly gazing at Jesus. No, these were rowdy, hard-working folks. They were day laborers with their squirming, squealing children and crying babies. There were kids running here and there throughout the crowd. There were men and women who were rowdy from a hard day's work. There were street people and tax collectors, and surely there were prostitutes. These were not carefully groomed people. These were certainly not the people you would meet in the temple, though those folks were probably there too, to make sure that Jesus stayed in line. No, in my opinion, this crowd is the first miracle and lesson of this story. Because when I look into this crowd, I see the diversity of people that the church is called to be with. This is a parable for the church of our day. The good news, it withers when it is locked away behind walls or shared only behind pulpits with disciples and good church folks. That is a great place for the good news to be, but it can't just stay there. It needs to be scattered wildly in all places, and not just by pastors, but by all of us. And here is the lesson of the first parable, right up front in the telling. It is not up to us to determine whether the soil is right. It is our work to help scatter and plant the seed. Now, I could just end there, but there are a couple other verses that I think contain lessons that could be useful for us as a church, and really for any of us who might be stuck somewhere. Jesus tells this crowd of people to really listen to this story about seed being scattered on a path where birds eat it up, and scattered in rocks where it can't grow, and scattered in weeds where it gets choked out, and finally, yes, there is some good soil. And so the people are like, these are things we already know about how seed works. These are things we already know, Jesus. So what is it you're really saying? And then Jesus says, hear. And it is in this that we find the second lesson of this particular selection of text. It is not enough to listen. we must also hear, which means digging deeper into what it is that is being offered, digging deeper into what it is we think is being said. When was the last time you felt heard? I mean really heard. How did it feel? How did you know you had been heard? I can say in today's world, we listen a lot. We listen to a lot of talking, but hearing, really hearing, to take in what is being said and to then do something with it, that is entirely different. Jesus calls on this crowd to hear and then to understand. And what is understanding? Understanding, as Gary Pulso-Verdon writes in Feasting on the Word, understanding is insight tied to urgency to act. Understanding is life attuning knowledge. If we simply listen, this is a nice story. And if we only hear and do nothing with it, it is as if those birds have pecked the words right out of our minds. There must also be action. So I wonder, is there an action that has been stirring for you? Something that maybe God has been nudging you to do? Or maybe it's just something you've been inspired to do, but haven't done yet. Now might be the time to apply some understanding. What is the fourth lesson? We find that in the story of the seeds on the rocky soil. I want us to think about this section of the story a bit differently than perhaps we have in the past. I want us to think about what happens when we sink our roots around rocks and wrap ourselves so tightly to one way of doing things. Maybe we wrapped ourselves around traditions. And what of that seed on rocky soil? What happens when we sink our roots into the wrong thing? Or maybe not even that. What happens when we wrap ourselves around just one way of doing things, or around traditions? Or maybe it's just simply that we are connected to what is right in front of us, simply because it is right in front of us. This rocky soil could be things like the way we have always done it. It is just what we do. If we can't go deep enough when the sun comes out, if we can't reach those roots deeper, or perhaps even find ourselves needing to pull those solid rocks out, those solid rocks that have been anchors for so long, but now they're blocking our reach for the dirt beneath, then we won't be able to grow in the new directions God is calling us to. Sometimes what worked before, or even what worked first, doesn't work anymore because the Word is calling us to root deeper, so much deeper, and root differently. Root in a soil that God has nurtured. If we get stuck in those rocks, we wither and die. Now please, friends, don't get me wrong. Those rocks have worked. But now what? Now they are not enough to endure for the kingdom work God has called us to as followers. So now what? Take a moment to think about what those rocks were. What has been useful that simply isn't working for you now? Or what has sustained you in this part of your journey, but perhaps now is holding you back? This is our fourth lesson. Don't let shallow roots fool you, because shallow roots are not the ones that last. And then we come to the fifth lesson, or the lesson of the seed that is scattered in the thorns. Friends, what are the things that get in the way of doing the work God has called us to do. I'm not talking about the things we're rooted to or have connected to. I'm talking about the things that literally take us away from the work. Those are the thorns. And those thorns are important. Friends, they look like important work or critical ministry. Or maybe they just look like the thing we have to do to fit in. But what they don't look like is the kingdom of God's thriving life. No, these things, they pull us away. They choke out the light so that we simply cannot grow. And it might have seemed important, but that is not the seed God is trying to nurture. And God needs us to grow those seeds. And there, in that fourth and fifth story about the seeds, we learn something about seeds that the church needs to hear. They can't just magically transport themselves to better soil. That's what the church is for. We are the ones who are able to carefully take that seed from that rocky patch and place it somewhere it can grow. Or work with those that we know and love to help clear away the weeds so that we can really attune ourselves to what it is that God is calling us to be about. The community exists to help the life of God take root in different ways. And sometimes, every once in a while, those scattered seeds land just right, and they grow and flourish. And all that growing and flourishing, that's God's work. Good soil, that can happen anywhere. But the ability for a seed to yield the way it does, that's God's work. We can clear away the rocks. We can weed the garden. And we can even keep scattering seed on the path, hoping it becomes a place where understanding can begin. But God is the one who gives the growth. What does that growth look like for you? It is probably wrapped around something that can sustain you. Not a rock or a weed, but a place where you can keep sinking deeper and deeper into life, into what sparks your curiosity, into what makes you feel most alive and in love with the world, with God. It is a place of learning who you are, learning who God is, learning who your neighbor is. When that seed is in good soil, the harvest is miraculous. It is more than enough. But notice in this story, the sower sows anyway. It doesn't matter if we are the path, or if our lives are rocky ground, or if they're choked out by thorny bushes, or if our lives are that good soil. The sower sows anyway. And so, friends, I wonder, what does it mean for us to be as persistent as that gardener? To sow and try things out and see what happens. We are sophisticated gardeners, no doubt. If we are deep into church work, we know our ministries and our mission fields. If we are deep into our life's work, we know our skills and our gifts. Or, at the very least, we know what is safe and keeping us going. But what if our calling isn't just to be the seed sown in the good soil, to do the things we are good at in the places we know how? What if our calling is to plant seeds and then to help clear the rocks and cut back the weeds? What if our calling is to plant those seeds wherever we are and wherever we go and wherever we find ourselves? Because that is what it means to be part of the kingdom work of God. where might we plant? What might we grow? Amen. And now, friends, hear this benediction. May the Creator, Sustainer, and Redeemer take us into the world to do our worshipful work this week, wherever that might be. Bless us, O God, your church. Bless us, your children. Bless your world, your good creation.